Report, Eva Brook Donnelly Museum and Archives. Mr. Blackwood, you have 10 minutes, sir, and I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. Options.
Excuse me. Thank you. Mr. Chair, Your Worship, members of Council, I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening very briefly and hopefully for the last time on behalf of the Norfolk Historical Society concerning the options report on the future of the Eva Brook Donnelly Museum and Archives. First of all, I would like to thank this council for its support of our organization and the museum and archives which we represent, not only financially, but with the allowance of staff time to work with us to prepare this report. I would also like to thank the Department of Heritage and Culture and its representatives, particularly Melissa Culver, not only for its particular help over the past 6 months, but for producing what we believe to be a very comprehensive report for your consideration. The Board of Directors of the NHS, as outlined in Appendix B of the report, is in agreement with the report's conclusion that option number 4 is the one which best serves the interests of all the parties involved in this process. Not only does option 4 preserve and expand the archives vital to the history of this county, but just as importantly, it allows for the museum to be reopened and revitalized so that this valuable collection can once again be available to the public under the direction of trained professionals. Should this council agree to accept the recommendation of this report, which we hope it will, the NHS board, its membership, and volunteers are eager and ready to help in the transition which would occur. We look forward to collaborating with the county to make sure that the legacy of Eva Brook Donnelly, which was entrusted to us, is maintained, and that the historical treasures which have been preserved on behalf of all of the citizens of Norfolk County will continue to be available to the next generation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being with us to hopefully finalize this. Just with respect to, I didn't read it in here, but with respect to these treasures that you're talking about, whose ownership would these artifacts be in? Would it be in the county's bookkeeping with value, or would it be still in some other organization?
If the county takes over control of the museum and archives, sir, and pays for the operating costs, it becomes those of the county.
And what about the artifacts that are in the Eva Brook Donnelly Museum?
That would be the ownership of the county.
Ownership of the county. Okay, thank you.
I've said it before. You pays the piper, calls the tune.
Thanks very much, Andy.
You're welcome.
Mayor Luke.
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't have a question, but if you'll allow me a brief comment.
Yes.
Very brief. To Andy, thank you for being here, but you have certainly thanked our staff for their work, well deserved, but I also want to say that we thank NHS for going through this process, through a difficult turn at the beginning of the year, and decisions you had to make. And I can say that we are pleased, and I think I can say that for all of us, that you are moving forward and working with the county in the best interest of the public, and that's the bottom line. It's not about you or us, it's about the best interest. And I want to sincerely say that give our thanks to the members of the board of NHS for all they've done in supporting to get through this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Andy. You may sit down.
Thank you.
Moving on to staff report DCS 1742, Eva Donnelly Brook Museum Options Report. Mr. Baird?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Manager of Heritage and Culture, Ms. Melissa Culver, is here to present her report and I would be glad to answer any questions when she completes that.
Thank you. This past January, the Norfolk Historical Society made a deputation to Council announcing that they had ceased the operations at the Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum and Archives due to financial constraints. As a result, Council directed staff to prepare an options report for the future operations of the site. The report is before you. It consists of 4 options with staffing, associated costs, and considerations attached for each option. It should be noted that the staffing costs in the report reflect job rate or the highest rate for the established position. However, we've been conservative with the revenue projections for the first year. Revenues will increase as services evolve and grants such as the CMOG program can once again be accessed. The report references the collection owned by the Norfolk Historical Society and housed at the Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum and Archives, stating that it has local and national significance. The NHS has been collecting Norfolk County's history since 1900, and as a result, this collection contains some of Norfolk's oldest and rarest artifacts, as well as archival documents. It's a collection that numbers in the tens of thousands. Specifically of note is the Cantillon collection of paintings and an invaluable pictorial history of early Norfolk County, 10,000 plus photographs of Norfolk County, and the Eva Brooke Donnelly collection of paintings and documentation of her exhibiting art alongside members of the Group of 7. The museum possesses pieces of the William Pope collection, Canada's own version of John James Audubon, perhaps the largest collection of his works outside the Toronto Public Library. The Van Norman Foundry pieces, again perhaps the largest of its kind in the country. This consists of one of two known surviving examples of the Van Norman cook stove, of which thousands were once made at Normandale and shipped as far west as Chicago and as far east to Montreal. The museum also possesses several items related to Abigail Becker and 3 extremely rare medals awarded to veterans of the War of 1812. Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum and Archives is home to the Grand River UEL Library, thousands of family files, the largest collection of American genealogical publications outside an academic library, and that does not include published genealogical material for dozens of Norfolk families and resources for almost all other counties in Ontario. County registry copybooks are in the collection, along with decades of local newspapers. The War of 1812 and original Norfolk militia muster rolls are also in the collection. And probably the most significant component of the collection is the Thomas Welch papers. These documents date back to the 1770s and were sent or written by the first surveyor of the region, Thomas Welch, and later his son Francis. These include personal correspondence from Joseph Branch, original orders from the Surveyor General of the New Colony, D.W. Smith, and original correspondence from Dr. W. Troyer, the first settler in Norfolk County, and much, much more, over 20,000 items. There is even a document within this collection which outlines some of the original Grand River Treaty agreements with the Indigenous leaders and representatives of the Crown like Robert Hamilton. The fact these items were kept in Norfolk is significant because when the new counties were established in the 1850s, all the papers were to have been sent to London as the capital of the new London district. Subsequent to that date, a fire in London in the registrar's office meant that all the documents from the early days of settlement in the district were lost. All that is except for Norfolk's. In preparing this report, staff has taken into consideration what would best serve the NHS and by extension the Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum and Archives, as well as the identified needs of the Norfolk County Heritage and Culture Division and more broadly Norfolk County. As a result, this report is recommending option 4, which includes the establishment of a municipal archives, an identified need. This model has been adopted by other municipalities, including Oxford, Elgin, Duffer, and Wellington, and others. This option also respects the heritage designation of the home through proper interpretation and provides an opportunity to continue to exhibit and promote the history of Simcoe, which is currently not done by any other museum in Norfolk County. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Melissa. Excellent report. I wouldn't mind if you could, I know you've been working with Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum and the people over there for quite some time, and I think you've come to realize that one of the priorities is the archive, and you've
I think you've made that clear, but could you explain just a little bit further the need for an archive in Norfolk County? Why do we need a Norfolk County archive? Maybe some of the other groups you could highlight, and maybe even some of your fellow colleagues, staff members and clerk's department and so on and so forth. So I wonder if you could just expand on that need.
Through the chair to council, Norfolk County archives are currently distributed in a variety of places. They certainly aren't all at Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum. About 2 or 3 months ago, the Norfolk branch of the Ontario Genealogical Society moved their archival documents from the Norfolk County Public Library, the Simcoe branch, and have taken them to Toronto because they had no place else for them to go and are looking to bring them back to Norfolk County. Bacchus Heritage Village is also looking for appropriate storage and a repository for their archives. They're scattered throughout the county. The county has some in the basement of this building. There's some over at Gab. It would be a way of bringing them all together and sort of a one-stop shop, so to speak, for people who want to research, for staff who want to access them, that kind of thing.
Councillor Height, then Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, it's mentioned on our first page here that this report was supposed to be brought back within 3 months, and this was back in January when Councillor Black moved it. What was the delay?
The delay was the concentration and the consultation with everyone. I spent a lot of time at Eva Brooke Donnelly, talking to the people there, what mattered to them, listening to the community, talking to my staff, and the best fit.
Who's running it now or paying for it?
Through the chair, right now we have a budget of $36,500 that helps to maintain the building. Norfolk County does. And 3 days a week it's open. The archives is operating with Norfolk Historical Society volunteers.
Okay, so you gave us 4 options. I don't see option 5, which is where it's all run by volunteers, with Norfolk County maintaining the operating costs. What was the reason?
Well, I would say that volunteers don't have the expertise that's needed to run and operate an archives properly or a museum, and that would be my reason for not saying it should be run by volunteers. I don't think that they have the capacity in terms of time either.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Oliver and then Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My line of questioning was going to be exactly the same as my colleagues a moment ago. I was disappointed in the report not to see any continued role for the Norfolk Historical Society. Mr. Chair, first of all, I apologize for my back to Melissa and staff. I do apologize for that. So as I look at option 4, where it's talking about, if I understand correctly, 2.5 FTE new positions with a budget of $187,000 just for those 2.5 new FTEs, I am also struck by the fact that we could have requested, I think, that NHS continue to operate the archival function of the building and of that facility. The archives are there. All of the discussion, a lot of it has focused around the importance of the archives versus the museum part. And so I would appreciate if Melissa can provide any further enlightenment, I guess, and I know she answered my colleague already that she felt the volunteers didn't have the capacity or the professional training, and yet we've been doing it that way this calendar year already. I haven't heard of any complaints. Would that not still be an option for us to request that NHS continue to perform that function of maintaining and operating the archives for us?
Through the chair to Councillor Oliver. The volunteers with the archives have been doing a great job, and that is primarily due to their commitment to keeping them open. They have expressed to me on more than one occasion how they feel that they don't have the expertise or the education to do it properly. The archives aren't organized in such a way that most archives are. It's difficult to know what is where, how to access it. They have expressed to me that they need help. They are more than willing, and I think in the report I outlined that by that they're already an important resource that we have and could continue to use. They want to be part of that. And in terms of the Norfolk Historical Society, we've talked about them being involved in the interpretation and tours of the heritage home, the museum side of it, and I'm very committed to helping them make the transition. It might be they play an advisory committee role like the other museums have. We haven't fleshed that out exactly, waiting to see what council has decided, but I certainly think that, I mean, Mr. Blackwood is opening and closing the museum the 3 days a week. Now they're opening Saturdays. When he's not available, I'm doing it. So it's not the greatest solution to running the museum and the archives.
Councilor Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the report, Melissa. My question, I guess, is I'm not sure how long ago, but a while back, the building itself has been upgraded or structurally reviewed and looked at. I think how long ago was that?
I'm not sure when the last time that happened.
Mr. Chair, if I could answer that question. The whole building has undergone a 20-year building condition assessment through our facilities people, and there's been a significant capital investment over the last 10 years, and the building is in excellent condition. All the systems in the building envelope, all that work is complete.
Yeah, how long ago it seems to me that it was a few years ago, but.
Time flies, yeah. I think there's been roofing and siding and HVAC work. It's probably completed last 2 to 3 years ago.
Did they repoint brick or soffit, facer, do that kind of, because there was all scaffold, was it not?
That's correct. Through the chair, the Everbrook home itself it's been repointed. It's had new cedar shingles put on. I think everything right down to the front door has been restored. So that it is in very excellent condition right now.
Okay. And through you again to Melissa, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The option 4, I apologize, I don't know the understanding of the proper term for where you get the grants.
Are you referring to the Community Museum Operating Grant, CMOG?
Yes.
Yes.
That's it. Now, do you show that in there at all?
No, I don't, because once the Historical Society closed, I'm sorry, through the chair, closed, they were no longer part of that program, so we would have to reapply, and that wouldn't be automatic, and it would probably take a year to go through that process. So there's no grants anywhere in those numbers.
Okay, but, and we're going through the same thing with Bacchus right now. And I wonder, like, if we were successful and got back into that, what kind of money would we receive? Could we receive?
Through the chair, currently the museums in Norfolk County are receiving anywhere from $15,000 to $19,000. So that's what we'd be looking at here as well.
Total or per museum?
Per site.
Per site?
Yes.
But would this have any more significance in terms of receiving more money or no?
Through the chair, it's hard for me to speculate on that. I suspect not. There's only so much money in the pot, and
right.
I wouldn't think so, but I can't say for sure.
Okay, well, do you know what they were receiving before they dropped out?
Through the chair, about $15,000 a year.
Oh, that's all, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Councilor Black.
Well, if you have exhausted speakers, but I'm ready to put the motion on the floor.
You have made that motion earlier, so go ahead. You want to speak to it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, certainly I'm going to move the recommendation in the report, and that is to support option 4. And the reason why is council, I guess a year or two ago, when Everbrook Donnelly Museum came, asked for a council representative to sit on their board. So I have been sitting on their board since then and have been able to see exactly what's going on, reviewing their financial information, and able to see the whole picture from where they came from a number of years ago, just around amalgamation. I guess that's, 18 years ago now, hard to believe. And they opted at that time to go it alone and run the operations side strictly by volunteers and with three paid employees, and raised money. And they at one time were flush with money, but over the years their benefactors have dropped off, and they no longer have that benefit. I know Councillor Oliver asked about the volunteers, and if they could have strictly run it with volunteers, they would certainly not be here at Norfolk County right now. I think that it is a Norfolk County-wide asset. It's the original museum that took into consideration all of Norfolk County, all artifacts throughout, even the Abigail Becker information and artifacts that are now being used down in Port Dover. They have shared that series of artifacts with the Port Dover Harbor Museum. So it has a long standing within Norfolk County. The town of Simcoe, Everbrook Donnelly donated the building to them, and consequently it's with amalgamation. It's now in ownership of Norfolk County. I feel that the Norfolk Historical Society has in fact provided Norfolk County with valuable service and maintained assets that I feel that, and I think I'm right, that there are accession papers that when someone donates something, or either a document or an archival piece of history, that really the ownership is the people of Ontario, not necessarily the people in Norfolk County or Simcoe or the Norfolk Historical Society. I think we all become custodians of those historical artifacts. And I guess I'd like to thank the Norfolk Historical Society for performing these tasks for the last 18 years, free and at no cost to Norfolk County. And I suppose had they taken the offer to become part of Norfolk County back in during amalgamation, I'm not sure how much it would have cost in the end, but substantially more than what we have paid now. It is an asset. I've even looked up from the insurance purposes, an asset worth over $2.5 million. The will does say, and I know it was reviewed by our lawyers, that the use of that property is for a museum or an art gallery. I've communicated with many people throughout Norfolk County during my time on the board, and including the library who would support this. They say that there is a need for this. I've talked to Catherine Bristol. Catherine Bristol downstairs has indicated that there is a need for a professional archivist in Norfolk County. As Melissa has indicated, there are many groups out there that are looking for storage, and it would be nice to have all these documents accessible to the public in one place. And I even know that at one time the Norfolk Field Naturalists were looking for a home for their documents. The Sports Hall of Recognition, they've finally found I guess, partial home down at the rec center, but not a full home for all their documents and photos. And there's many other groups out there that are looking for some place to store their archival information. So I guess, without going on too much further, I think it's an incumbent upon us to support the recommendation in the report and bring Everbrook Donnelly Museum into the fold of Norfolk County. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I can't support the recommendation that's on the floor. Council has heard my comment before about the fact that we're going from an operation that was essentially self-sufficient up until the last couple of years, being completely operated by volunteers. They employed their own archivist/curator at the time, and we're now contemplating taking it, bringing it into the fold, as my colleague said, adding 2.5 new staff positions of our own, along with $75,000 of annual operating costs for what we have previously been covering for $35,000 or $36,000, I think, over the last number of years when we've been covering those operating costs, and $100,000 in capital cost as well. What I would like to see, Mr. Chair, if this motion doesn't pass in its present form, to ask our staff to go back and further investigate with the Norfolk Historical Society some means for them perhaps to continue to oversee and to employ any necessary staff to run the facility. They can do it, I would suggest, much more economically than Norfolk County can for a whole pile of reasons. And while I didn't like us adding additional subsidies every year in the interim, having continued with that would be quite a bit less costly than option 4, which is being proposed for us here by staff. So I think we need to do some additional work on this before it's finally resolved. For me, and I said this before in my questioning of Melissa, priority 1 for me is the archival collection. I think we need to protect and preserve and make that available to the public far more significantly than adding another museum and another set of artifacts to our fleet of museums, if you like, our number of sites. So I feel that more work needs to be done, and as a result, I can't support the option 4 recommendation.
Councillor Wells, Height, and then Brunton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Most of you know that my brain isn't as sharp as the rest of yours. So to Melissa, if I understand your report correctly, option 4 is $242,000 plus $100,000. So if we approve this, you'd be looking at $342,000 for operational costs. Am I correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Wells, the annual operating cost would be $242,000. That $75,000 to $100,000 is a one-time capital cost to make any the building usable for an archives and whatever else we may need in terms of setting up.
Thank you. My second question through you, Mr. Chair, to Melissa would be, and what would happen if we choose not to come up with this money? What do you foresee as the future of this facility?
Through the chair to Councillor Wells. Well, I've been talking to the Norfolk Historical Society now for the last 6 months, and I think that you'll find that they have neither the time or the financial means to operate a museum and an archives. What the legal implications are of the collection, we would have to look into that. It'll get the Ontario Historical Society involved. People donate these and they become part of the public trust. We have a legal and moral obligation to that. So I can't give you a really good answer for that, but there will be some complications involved.
Thank you, Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be supporting option 4. What I've heard tonight is that we have one volunteer who opens and closes and has to use county staff to help him do that. The volunteer base has dropped to be almost non-existent at this point. Customers are down. We're looking at $262,000 per year operating costs. And that's if we get the $15,000 CMOG grant, which we're not going to get this year because it'll take it a while, and $100,000 in capital costs for the first year. That's pretty tough, especially if people aren't coming out. Personally, I love the building. It's awesome. The collection's really neat, and you go in there and look at stuff. I wish it was online. But the fact of the matter, I don't think there's enough people interested. Even the committee that has been running it for so long doesn't appear that interested in it anymore. So why would I want to burden the taxpayers for something that the public just isn't interested in? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak again. Melissa, all the other museums in the county, they have archivists and curators that operate them, or or are they run, I know there's a lot of volunteers, but how are they operated?
Through the chair to Councillor Button, each site has a full-time curator-director and a full-time assistant curator, and then 0.5 of summer students during the summer months.
Is there any way we could have one of these groups oversee that museum too? Like, do they have to be right in those museums at all times? Or like, I know the one we have at Bacchus, I think, is part-time? Part-time, and they're applying for the grant. I'm just wondering, do we need one in every museum, or can we have one that looks after all the museums?
Through the chair to Councillor Brunton, to qualify for CMOG, you need to have a full-time curator on site. That's one of the reasons that Bacchus originally lost their CMOG funding. And our sites aren't seasonal, so they run 12 months a year, and lots of programming, events, collections work. I can't see how we could take anyone from one of those sites and move them in to help with Eva Brooke Donley.
Well, I look at and it's not uncommon across this great province that volunteers are a different generation. They're disappearing. And we need, like, we're either going to have to let these things go, or we're going to have to pay to have people there to look after it. So I've been in this museum, and I know what's in there, and I know there's a great collection of stuff, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but as of now, I'm going to support it. So, thank you.
Okay, I have no more speakers. Councillor Black has moved that report DSC 17, sorry. Councillor Black?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to speak the second time. I guess maybe, I don't know what's going to happen with this group either, but I don't think that the Eva Brooke Donley Museum will be fulfilling its potential the way it is right now without Norfolk County taking it under its wing. I do fear that there may be some negative consequences of not supporting an option for or giving support to this museum. I know you'll never get 100% support from everyone throughout Norfolk County, but as representative from Simcoe, I do have a good sense and a good feeling that at the very least the people in Simcoe support this. They represent 1/4 of the population of Norfolk County. But even people throughout, beyond the borders of former town of Simcoe, we have most of our board members made up from people from Port Dover. So clearly there's support from that community. We have members that go throughout Norfolk County that support this museum. This museum is known worldwide. It is used extensively, but it is not fulfilling its potential. To go back to them and ask the volunteers to try again, I'm afraid that isn't the solution. That has been explored. The people in the archives are hard workers. They are interested in the archives. They are very, very committed and dedicated people, but they need a professional archivist to direct them, which would actually, in the end, increase their efficiency. They're trying to digitalize documents. So I know no one wants to add an extra amount or an extra burden upon Norfolk County, but I guess one of the ways I look at it, that this group, Norfolk Historical Society, has saved the town of Simcoe and Norfolk County taxpayers thousands and thousands of dollars over the past 18 years by managing this facility through volunteers and a paid curator. Their primary focus will be on the archives. The museum aspect would probably be a lot smaller and contained within the house portion. The archives, as Melissa indicated in to the Norfolk Historical Society would function better if it was moved downstairs and more accessible to everyone. So I guess it's the best I can say to try and get support from my fellow colleagues around the table. Thank you.
Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you. We all know the problem with volunteers. Councillor Brunton hit it on the nose. The young people are just not coming out. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a church or a service club or a museum or whatever. The next generation is just not stepping up to the plate. And that's the issue here, is people to do the work. Has there ever been any thought given to consolidating all our museums? Have a Norfolk County museum rather than one in Waterford, one in Delhi, one in Port Dover, you know? Is that an option to cut down on the facilities and to cut down on the number of people needed to operate them? I think it would be a great concept if there was such a location to be found, but has there ever been any thought given to that notion?
Through the chair to Councillor Sonnenberg, no, we haven't specifically looked at that in Norfolk County. There are other municipalities that do have that model. I suspect we would get some pushback from each of the communities that are very committed to their particular community museum. We haven't looked at that model.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me speak again as well. I guess I do have another question for Melissa in light of some of the other comments just in the last few minutes. Melissa, given that I think everyone's priority is the archives and perhaps continuing to have those available, what would be the implications, in your opinion, of retaining the proposal for an archivist, but acknowledging that we cannot afford, perhaps, to have another museum in our county, a second facility within the former town of Simcoe, along with the Norfolk Arts Centre, and in other words, abandon the idea of trying to continue to operate that facility as a museum with artifacts on display, open to the public, et cetera, et cetera. We put our emphasis on the archives. We deaccession, if necessary, the artifacts that are part of the museum collection, and we make the space available in that building downstairs as well as upstairs available to become the county archives. Is that, number one, is that doable? Would it achieve the greatest good for the least expense? And is it something that you feel staff and perhaps our volunteer partners from the Historical Society could or would support?
Through the chair to Councillor Oliver, I can't speak for the volunteers in terms of what they would support, but I suspect that they wouldn't support deaccessioning the collection. Much of it pertains to Norfolk County. It's very early, it's very rare, and I'm not sure where it would go. Quite often in the deaccessioning process, museums, their first step is to offer it to other museums. That's certainly a possibility in terms of certain things, but a lot of it is Norfolk County's history. In the proposal on option 4, the actual museum itself, that work, is much less than it is at the other museums. So I'm proposing that the house be the focal point, and that tours and interpretive programming be done just on a seasonal basis. So through the summer when there's tourists in the area, maybe at Christmas time when people tend to go to those types of places to celebrate the season, and have one small gallery upstairs in the house that would be exhibit Simcoe's history. I'm envisioning that all of the museums all have large collections, but they're Norfolk County collections, even though they've been given to Waterford or Port Dover or Delhi, and that there will be, because they all use Past Perfect for their accessioning and it's all online, and I'm hoping that we can network that these artifacts can be used by all of the sites and be borrowed. So, you know, if it's Abigail Becker's things, that they could go, and they have gone to Port Dover. Things that pertain to Waterford could go there. So I'm suggesting in option 4 that the archives be the focus, and that the museum portion of it be not so much the focus. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, you certainly did, and thank you for that. But my only final comment, Mr. Chair, in that context, is that perhaps rather than needing 2.5 FTEs, what we really need is the 1.0 FTE archivist. And that person, in addition to whatever duties he or she would perform around the archives, perhaps would be able to oversee a significantly reduced museum interpretive program. I mean, I'm just really struggling with 2.5 FTEs to operate a facility that up till now has been operated by one FTE employed by the Historical Society.
Now I have no more speakers. Councillor Black has moved that report DCS 1742, Eva Donnelly Museum and Archives options received as information, and that council hereby approve the recommendation option 4, the transitioning of the Eva Donnelly Brooke Museum and Archives into the official Norfolk County Archives, and further, that staff be directed to develop an implementation plan with associated financial requirements being brought forward into the 2018 capital plan and levy supported operating budgets. All those in favor? Those opposed? I vote no, unfortunately. Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Chair, I'll put forward a new motion then, and that is that we receive the report as information, of course, and that council directs staff to investigate still further options to repurpose that facility as an archives, full stop.
Hang on a second, the clerk's reading the, but if you got some, let's get that on the floor and then we'll go from there. Just give us a few minutes. While we're doing that, I made a boo-boo here. I should have got a motion to receive the deputation of Andy Blackwood as information. Councillor Mayor Luke has. All those in favor? That is carried. Councillor Black.
Well, I thank Councillor Oliver for putting the second motion on the floor. And if it'll clear up any of his confusion, I think if we had supported the option 4, it still would have come back to us, because the last further talked about an implementation plan and bringing it forward to the 2018 capital plan. So we would have been able to maybe do the same thing that Councillor Oliver is suggesting at this time, is to look at the main focus is the archive. So I certainly, and the clerk gets it down there and she can reread it again, so I'm totally clear on it. I think I could support that.
Okay, Jill, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to committee, that staff be directed to further investigate with the Norfolk Historical Society to review additional options to repurpose the facility as an archives, full stop.
Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Chair, the deputy clerk didn't need to have the words full stop in there. That was me just trying to end my train of thought. So I appreciate it, but
okay.
She didn't need to do it.
I apologize, and I would also like to add that it be received as information. Thank you.
Mayor Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will support this motion. This is a tough pill to swallow. We knew it was coming. We've known it now for the better part, well, longer than a year, that there would be some decisions that would have to be made, and they would not be easy. This is an incredibly historical landmark in Norfolk County, and certainly in the former town of Simcoe. We have excellent museums, in our various communities, and this museum is just as important as any one of them. So I personally think we have to do some more research here, if I may, do some more digging in and looking at ways, because I know, quite honestly, that the concern around the table for most people is the cost and the increase. There's no question. But at the same time, this is something I don't want to see this county cut loose, let go. It's too important. So I'm confident, as much as Melissa's done a lot of work, and NHS as well, I think that we need to rethink this a little bit, how we're going to get our costs down a bit and yet somehow keep things going there. And I agree that the archives, absolutely the focus. Not that the museum and the artifacts aren't important, heaven no. Goodness sakes, of course they are, but this is a tough one. Thank you.
Councillor Wells, then Height.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I will support the motion on the floor, as I did support the main motion. And I did want to just make a comment for those people who think that I always worry about money. I do worry about money. But to be fair, we have 3 other museums operating in Norfolk County, doing a wonderful service, and I believe that this operation also served the people of Norfolk very well. Thank you.
Councillor Height, then Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope some of the options that come forward are a little more diversified than options 1 through 4 on this page. And one of the ones I would like to see is the building appraised and how much is it worth if we sell it? I don't have a problem moving the archives to one of our other museums right now, the Waterford one. Simcoe has the Arts Center here in town, which is finally getting up and rolling. It's had some capital infrastructure upgrades. It'll be looking pretty very soon. This building's in a prime location. Maybe a private investor wants it for something else, and I'd like to see that as an option, as opposed to us running something that volunteers are not interested in running, customers aren't interested in coming into it anymore. So, but another thing I'd like to know is, when's the return date? Are we going to set one? Maybe Councillor Oliver could ask that or answer that, since it's his motion.
Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think it was my intent, and I think the intent of the original recommendation in the report, that we would deal with this prior to capital plan and levy budget. So I'm hoping it could come back in October, the beginning of October, would be my request, if staff can handle that.
Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting, at least the way I've read the report, that we wouldn't be having this discussion if back in 2001 the Historical Society threw up their hands and said, "It's your museum, look after it." We wouldn't be having this discussion right now. It would have been like all the rest of the museums in Norfolk County. Having said that, I guess, Melissa, the Historical Society, I assume, will still have volunteers that are willing to fill in at times or whatever as volunteers. Have you discussed that with him?
Through the chair, no, I haven't. And, you know, just like any other volunteer, it's volunteerism. So you do it when you want to, or if you don't want to, you don't do it anymore. So I don't think that that's something that we can, you know, commit them to.
No, I realize that, but
we can ask and, you know, see what happens.
the .5 was a student,
0.5 was 2 students.
2 students, whatever.
Yes.
I think Councillor Oliver had a good point, like 1 full-time and whatever part-time is required to run it might be something that you can reconsider. Anyways, thank you.
We can do that.
County Manager.
In consultation with my colleagues, it's a fairly significant undertaking, going to require a fair bit of analysis. We'd be comfortable saying we can bring a report back in late September, if that so pleases this council.
That's okay. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I ask Melissa one final question, given that we've now potentially bought some more time? The proposed $75,000 to $100,000 capital expenditure to house the archival records, would this, in the Canada's 150th anniversary year with a number of special programs federally and provincially around Canada's heritage, are there any opportunities, in your opinion, for us to possibly apply for funding to offset some of the cost of such a capital expenditure?
Through the chair, all of the Canada 150 and Ontario 150 announcements have been made, so that funding isn't available anymore, but I can certainly look at other avenues. We're always looking for grants to help fund our initiatives. And if I could just address Councillor Height's comment about the selling of the Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum. We're kind of at a legal counsel is very hasn't defined whether or not we can legally sell that property. So that's why that didn't come forward as an option. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we'll go on. I'm not sure until we have something that comes further along, I guess. So, we shall move on. Okay? Sorry? Okay, I'll call. You have the motion? Sorry.
Through the chair, the amendment moved by Councillor Oliver that report DCS 1742 Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum and Archives Options Report be received as information, and that staff be directed to further investigate with the Norfolk Historical Society to review additional options to repurpose the facility as an archive and report back in late September 2017.
All those in favor? That is carried. Now we can move on to Tamara Smith, re-bylaw to allow chickens in Simcoe town limits. Please come forward, Tamara. Just give it a minute for people to leave.
I have a, well, it's just a minute or two that I need played. Bear with me, I'm a little nervous. It's an MP4. And I hope I saved it properly on there.
Just to let you know, you have 10 minutes.
I probably won't take it all.
Okay.
And once you hear this, you might just ask me to leave anyway. Is it coming up? Well, while we're waiting for it to come up, I'm going to ask you, I want to thank you for having me in. I want to ask your indulgence and ask you to all close your eyes like you're sleeping. You're having the most wonderful dream. It's just a shortcut, it's not going to play? Okay, I'm sorry. It was squawking chickens. Very loud, squawking, noisy chickens. And this is 5:30 in the morning. You are rudely awakened by your neighbor's chickens. This recently happened to me. My neighbors kind of jumped the gun with the bylaw and had chickens come in. And for a week, every morning at 5:30, I was woken by these creatures. They were being threatened by a predator, be it a raccoon, a skunk, a dog, or a coyote. And I know it's been reported that Port Dover, as well as Hillcrest Road, has seen coyotes. Now, coyotes in downtown Simcoe. We have cats, we have dogs, we have young children. Is this something we want? Port Dover and Hillcrest Road, that's just a very short stroll for a hungry predator looking for a tasty chicken and its eggs. That's just one of the hazards of having chickens in town. The other is the stench. These need to be cooped up. They need to be cleaned. Who's going to do this? The same people that don't pick up after their dogs? They're going to rake out these coops and shovel it. Then where are they going to put it? They're going to pile it in their backyard? On a hot summer day, can you imagine the smell? Not something I want. I don't believe that chickens belong in a town. If we allow chickens, what's next? Goats? Pigs? Cows? It's all livestock. To me, livestock belong on a farm, not in town. Thank you. Oh, you have questions? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. I apologize.
Are there any questions? Councillor Columbus?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So do you still currently live beside someone that has chickens?
They've been removed. I personally went to bylaw and reported them because the law hadn't been passed and they were in violation.
And how many chickens did they actually?
They had 4, as far as I'm aware, and they did get loose a couple of times and were wandering around. I live on Norfolk Street South. I know we have issues with the duck park with the geese. I just can't see people stopping for chickens. They're not protected.
Mm-hmm. Guess that's why the chicken crossed the road.
I think so.
Thank you very much. I guess that's all.
Thank you for your time.
I need a motion to receive the deputation. Mayor Luke, all those in favor? That is carried. The next thing, there are 2 correspondents on starting on page 29 and 30. We should receive those as information as well. Councillor Black? All those in favor? That is carried. So then we're going down to staff report DSC 1757, Backyard Chickens Feasibility Review. Who's got that one?
I've got that one, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. The much anticipated chicken report is before you here this evening. What we tried to look at, the original motion, council did receive correspondence from a resident in Simcoe seeking consideration of a bylaw that would permit backyard chickens. It was further added that staff be directed to provide a report with options for a trial period to allow chickens on non-agricultural property. So although we were not necessarily looking at options, first and foremost, we wanted to create some balance to the report. You don't have to look too far or too hard to find out the merits and the benefits of keeping backyard hens, as well as the disadvantages. There's been considerable work put into that. And this isn't just a Norfolk County issue. There's pressures for municipalities right across the country. Obviously, the more densely populated, the more problems there can be. We did receive comments from our Acting Chief Medical Officer of Health. His comments are shown on page 3 of the report. And from a staff perspective, we have put forward a recommendation for you that backyard chickens not be permitted in Norfolk County. And that's simply on the complaint and nuisance, our research on that. We know that there are health issues, but that is not necessarily related to the chicken, but rather the ownership and their care, and that leading to secondary problems. And as well, we've suggested some form of control in all the progressive municipalities that we'd investigated, talk about having some sort of administration of the program, that there be site inspections and consent forms from neighbors, something to that effect. Based on that, the additional work that we feel this may result, there would be some impacts on staffing. And although not everybody in Norfolk County in a residential area would conceivably have a chicken, we do anticipate there to be considerable uptake on that. So that is staff's recommendation that that the amendment to our bylaw The council refused the raising of egg-laying chickens within the urban and hamlet residential zones in Norfolk. However, if council so decides that they wish to pursue that, we've also provided some recommendations that we do have a very effective animal care and control bylaw that would simply just need an added schedule